What's going on? It's Taisophon and I'm coming at you guys with another video. So I recently finished Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and as enjoyable as the game was, there were some things about the game I wasn't feeling, and I would like to share some of those things with you guys in this video. Now, the first thing that really stood out to me was the amount of minigames Square decided to put in this game. There's nothing wrong with minigames in Final Fantasy or video games in general, but the way Square went about it in this game, someone on the team had to have been smoking something crazy. Apparently, somebody with infinite wisdom thought it was a good idea to make you play a wide variety of minigames once you hit Costa del Sol, and then soon after that, you reach the Corel region and you have to play even more minigames at the Gold Saucer. It felt like this was Square's way of padding the game by stuffing it with unnecessary minigames, because the way these were implemented into the game, you couldn't just skip over it and head right back into the main story. Most, if not all, of these minigames were mandatory for you to complete if you wanted to progress further into the game, and that didn't sit right with me at all. It's like the Final Fantasy 16 situation all over again, where the story starts getting good and then they manage to throw something into the game that lowers the excitement and the intensity of the game. Whatever they throw into the game might not be bad at all, but I think timing is very important when you want to throw certain things into the game. Honestly, Square could have just kept Queen's godlike blood in the Gold Saucer minigames, and that would have been cool with me. There was just no need for the Costa del Sol minigames at all, and the game could have been just as great without them. As a matter of fact, a lot of the minigames were actually entertaining. For example, the piano playing was cool, the shooting minigame was cool, Chocobo racing was fun for the first hour or so, Chocobo flying minigame was a pretty nice challenge, Fort Condor was addicting, and destroying all the boxes before time runs out with Cloud, that was good in part 1 and it was also good in Rebirth. But there was just too much padding in Minigame Del Sol. We should have just arrived at Minigame Del Sol, had Aerith and Tifa change into their little skimpy bikinis. You know, every guy playing the game has one hand on the controller and one hand on their buster sword. Have Cloud and Barret go shirtless so all the girls playing can achieve faucet failure, and just be done with the area. It didn't need to be drawn out as much as it was. Another thing I didn't like about Rebirth, which is something that I liked at first until I got deeper into the game, was the exploration. Trying to navigate some of these maps in this game makes me want to throw myself into a pool of Mako. I first started feeling this way when I got to the Gongaga region of the game. Every nook and cranny was just a big clusterfuck of dead ends and endless jumping from cliff to cliff with your Chocobo. All the plants and vegetation everywhere combined with the low frame rate on graphics mode didn't help at all. The whole map was just claustrophobic as shit. Whoever decided that this layout of the map was a good idea, we need to get Professor Hojo to throw you on that lab table, get his surgical equipment, and just start poking at your skull, because I'm convinced your brain doesn't work like how other people's brain work. I even made a post about this on my X stating my frustration with this map. It overall wasn't aesthetically pleasing at all in my opinion. The Cosmo Canyon region sucked Koopo nuts also, constantly having to figure out which mountain leads to whatever side quest. Some of the side quests weren't bad at all, but some of them were just a pain to get through because it requires you to travel so far into the map, and some of the maps are a bitch to explore like I stated before. The best map to navigate for me personally was the Nibelheim region map. That map, I completed everything pretty smoothly, and the side quests in that region didn't feel like prison labor. It was fun to use the Chocobos to travel on that map because it allows you to glide over large bodies of water at high speeds, which I thought was really dope. Not to mention, collecting intel for Chadley feels like a chore to do sometimes. This is something that you don't have to do in the game, but you lose out on a bunch of treasure and a bunch of game-changing materia because of it. So I made sure I collected all of his intel and complete as many side quests as possible before moving to the next region, because I wanted to get the most out of the game as possible. The moment where I said to myself, you know what, I had enough of this, was the chapter before you reach the northern continent. At that point, I was feeling good about completing all the quests and collecting all of Chadley's intel and beating everyone in Queen's Blood and collecting all of Gilgamesh's artifacts, etc., just for Square to give you a shitload of more quests to do, not only in the Nibelheim region, but in all the past regions that you already visited. At that point, I was sick and tired of doing them at that point, and I just wanted to get on with the game's story. At that point, I was already at like at 120 hours into the game and I just wanted to be done with it. But even still, it took days for me to get through some of the maps in here, and it completely destroyed my immersion in the game at times. This might be a bad analogy, but try to follow me with this. It's equivalent to reading a book that has 10 chapters in it, and you only read about 3 chapters out of that book, and then come back a month later to read another 3 chapters. By that time you come back to read another 3 chapters of the book, you had already lost any immersion you had with the book's story at that point. This is one of the reasons why I think linear games aren't as bad as people try to make them out to be, because linear games tend to be very straightforward and to the point with little to no distraction from the game's main story, which as a consequence makes the game's story easier to digest. Now there's nothing wrong with having option in video games, as things like side quests, Chadley's intel, and minigames are optional in this game. At least try not to make most of it a pain in the ass to get through for players that decide to participate in the game's optional activities. But even with that said, it did feel really good 100%ing a map before you moved on to a different region, and I did make sure I did that for most of them. Another problem I had with this game is the amount of times Sephiroth shows up. Now when it comes to making Sephiroth look like a grimy ass, evil ass, sinister ass freaking character, Square gets a 10 out of 10 for that. They're doing a pretty good job of making players, at least the ones that aren't sexually attracted to him, feel hatred towards Sephiroth, but at the same time, the more Sephiroth pops up during cutscenes throughout the game, the less intimidating and the less scary he seems to be. I would go as far as to say that every moment outside of the Nibelheim situation and the Marsh Snake incident, Sephiroth just doesn't have that mysterious and ominous air about him anymore. But I'm gonna be honest, having this guy thrown in my face for like 45% of the game's cutscenes ruins the villainous aura that Sephiroth had in the original Final Fantasy VII. At times it felt like he was one of the party members traveling alongside us without actually being there. Even at the final part of the game, you have Cloud, Zack, and Sephiroth facing off, and the screen does that thing where it cuts to each one of their faces, kind of like how it does at the fight at the end in the original. He even takes the shape of his final boss model at the end of the game in the original on top of that, and it just makes me think, why are they using up all the iconic camera angles and boss designs where we're only on part 2 of the trilogy? It makes me wonder why Square is using up all of these assets so early into the game. What's Sephiroth gonna do or look like by the time part 3 of the remake drops? We've damn near seen Sephiroth pull out every trap card in his hand. The only thing he hasn't done is use the black materia. I would say that there were fewer I remember this from the original game moments, and more what the hell is going on here, this wasn't in the original game moments. The best way I can describe it is, it's like they're making the game feel familiar to me because I've played the original, but at the same time feeling like I have no idea what's going on or what's going to happen even though I played the original. This made the game hard to digest at certain points, and even after finishing the game, I'm still trying to understand what the developers are going for with this game in the future. Honestly, I enjoyed the game overall, and I like this game 10 times more than its predecessor. They've improved on the combat, they've improved on the world building, but it suffers from pacing issues and too much unnecessary padding that the game would have been fine without it being there. Let me know down below what your issues were with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and if you feel the same way that I do. As usual, if you liked the video, hit the like button. If you want to keep up with more of my videos, hit the subscribe button. This has been Taisophon, and I'm out, people. Later.